You're watching Inside iOS Dev, your favorite show about real-world iOS development.
Hey guys, so today we have a special guest, Sourabh. Sourabh, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, Alex. How are you?
Good. Could you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I have been in iOS from past nine plus years, and I've worked on many utility applications, e-commerce applications, telemedicine applications, and currently I'm working with a fintech company. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Sourabh here, he messaged me and Sandeep and asked for help with system design interviews. And I think, Sourabh, you have one system design interview question that you're particularly interested in. So we decided, sure, we can chat and all, but why don't we just record the podcast and out of it and help other people as well, right? Who might have the same interview process, right? So here's what we were just before they starting the recording for this show. This is what we were looking through, and Sarah, maybe you can. I'm looking at this basically first time, so maybe you can also walk me through what the problem is.
Yeah. So being a front end developer, a mobile developer, we have to build a payment module page where imagine if you're going to buy something, a product, or you're going to subscribe or do some payments. We get this page from backend that these all are the options where anyone you can select it and move to the next page where can you scroll down? Yeah, so here these are for the credit and debit cards where you can add the number and then go to the actual payment page with the payment gateways. You can select any of these options. The question is how you will model these pages, how you will show these pages, because this was the things we have to consider in this class models, APIs, and what architecture you will use for showing this, which depends. It depends on the use case. So how you decide those architecture to which you're going to show. One of the questions was how the next page will be rendered, considering each payment mode had different detailed views. So we decide we will get this data from the backend and then we will render those pages at runtime, because
Right.
every payment gateway has different web page means pages where we have to show the UIs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, what I'm trying to do here is mimic a real world scenario, right? Usually on your interview, yes, you prepare for the interview, but you don't really know exactly what question you'll be asked.
Yeah.
Except though, you can probably guess the type of like problem potentially that the company might ask you, depending on what company it does. So if it's a fintech, like this one's probably a fintech company, they would care about features like this, right? Like such as payment modules and systems. If it's an e-commerce company, I worked at a bunch of those, they really usually care about you designing the product page that displays the product and has an add or checkout or add to cart button, because that's the money maker, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, seems like we're dealing with a fintech company. So I think what sort of overall you would want to start as in your interview with is asking lots of clarifying questions, like what is this about, what for, and product questions specifically, not even technological at first. Like what is it supposed to do to the user? What's the end of the value that the module produces? So in this case, you already explained it, but let me kind of try to reiterate in my own words and see if we understand. Which again, you could do exactly the same on your interview with your interviewer. They'll probably appreciate that you're not just jumping into a solution, but you're thoughtful about it and you want to understand the problem first better so that you solve it better. Okay, so in this case, I'm assuming there's the other side of the app. It might be a banking app, might be a stock brokerage, something like that, with other features. But then at some point, you need to add this payment module where you could add credit cards, debit cards, yada, 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 right?
This is very common, means very famous in India. This payment, it's an app where you can do payments through that UPI and all.
Right. So there's, okay. And then as you click on them, for example, clicking on the credit card or debit card, I would assume would look exactly the same because they have the same format. You'd see this screen, but then this is different net banking, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So each one of those, as it was described here, has different screens. Got it.
Yeah. And these are
uh-huh.
this Paytm. Can you go up above?
Yep.
The first so this Paytm and this UPI. So these are the apps. Means this is a Beam API app which has UPI, and then Paytm. You can also add money to your wallet and pay through Paytm. So they will that on clicking on Paytm, we will be redirected to Paytm app where you can do the payment and come back to our app.
Got it. Okay, so that's also an interesting thing. Yeah. I'm not sure if you'll have enough time to dig that deeper on your interview, because it's usually 40 minutes to an hour, but we'll try. So, okay. So the first thing I would probably try to do, and we're doing it with this tool over the screen share, right? If you're in person, it's going to be a whiteboard probably, but I guess these days everyone's remote and you could use a tool like this. So let's sketch it out. We've got payment options, right? Payment options are, seems like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Yeah.
So we have 5, 4, 5, right? First one is credit card. This one's debit card. And then we've got the net banking, and then
Paytm,
Paytm. TM, and then what was the last one?
UPI.
UPA. Oh, PI.
Yeah.
All right. So this is more of a domain, high-level domain overview.
We will get this data from API, from backend.
Right.
What things we have to show over there on the payment page where the user will initiate.
Right. So let's talk that through. So some of the things, there's probably various options. And again, right, on your interview, this is what you probably want to be asking the interviewer to tease out the details. I'm assuming that credit card and debit card, they're similar view, and we can have a native, and it always will be native view for this, right? Because they're exactly the same and it doesn't change, and we don't need to go to any third party to render it, right? Of course, we have to go to some API backend when we submit the data, but for rendering, that's a native view, right? Which is going to look like this. Then the net banking. This is the question, right? Are we getting, do we want to have native UI for this with all of these options, or this is something provided by the third party of the net banking in a web view? That's something to, basically, it's not up to you. Honestly, as an engineer, that's kind of product question, right?
Business requirements means it's product call.
Unless they have both, or rather, or unless we want to consider, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe some of them have an API, and then you can have a native UI. But let's assume, for the sake of the conversation, then no, not really. This is just a web view.
These net banking options are common to all platforms, so it will be great. It will be good to make at one place, that is the web view in web, and that is been open to all the platforms with the same view.
Yeah. Then we got these two guys.
Yeah. So these have their own apps.
Right. So this is a little different, and perhaps this is why they are asking you that. So each one of them has an app. Potentially, I don't know how it works, but potentially there's multiple ways. So let's just talk about this guy first. There might be an deep link, universal link redirect, right? Or some form of that to TM native app, right? Potentially.
Yeah, or it can also be like that they provide their SDKs, payment SDK.
Right. Or Paytm SDK. That's another option, right? Then it would be our native UI, right? Our own, but utilizing their SDK. So that's a little different, right? From this, obviously.
Yeah.
Or they have a web view exactly the same way like this guy's.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we might want to consider that as an option, right? Probably if you ask this, like get down to this level of granularity with your interviewer, right? They'll probably like that you want to figure it out. And most likely they'll tell you, oh yeah, it's this guy. Because so that to make it different for the
Yeah.
problem, right, that you're solving. Yeah. And then, I mean, this guy is probably exactly the same, right?
It's like same. It's like Paytm only. Means the same thing will for
Yeah.
this UPI also.
Yeah. So we don't need to.
Means we can remove this UPI as of now. Means because Paytm and UPI are almost same.
Okay. So this is our kind of high level domain problem in that sense, right? Then I guess like let me think, where to go next from here. You could already start actually designing the architecture if you want, but just based on that, there is more details on like right hand side, if you will, to figure out on how after we capture the data in each one of those, where does it go later. I mean, we could probably we can do this. So let's see, do they have any details on that part? Things to consider: API required, architecture, show all payment options based on the response from the backend. Things to consider are payment mode, credit card. Yes. We will need to tell yes. How will the next page? Okay. Once the user will redirect to a web page. Wait, hold on. Once a user submits the final option, so I guess the user clicks through here, fills this in, and let's say click start membership. So each one of those options will end with some form of a start membership button, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Start membership or buy means, let's take an example of start membership. Yeah.
Okay. Then we will wait for the tax to be.
Back to the success of failure response.
Will you? Interesting. Okay. I didn't. This is something you might want to ask. Like,
means this was asked afterward. Fallback mechanism means it's been asked after. Means we discuss these things.
Okay. So my assumption and what I probably would tell them as I was interviewing with these people, I would be like, okay, well, we got this input capture high level, right? There is more detail to it, and we'll go into it. And architecture, like, is it view models or presenters or whatever else? But super high level, these UI pieces, they're all collecting data from the user in one form or another. They're just different UI and different data to collect. But at the end of the day, there is an answer, right? Either there is probably, as far as I remember how payments things go, there is a credit card token of sorts. Well, not a token. So I suppose actually, yeah, that might be more complex. Payments, payment. So we would have our company, right, for this product. We probably should have some sort of our own, either our own payments API or like a Stripe or something like that payments API, right, to deal with credit cards, because this is something we don't want to be handling really client side, right? Or just in general, it's difficult to work with. So we would be submitting here credit card data, right? So whatever the user entered, let me say send, maybe something like that. And then we'll get back the credit card token, right? Some form of tokenization of it so it's more secure and we can use that for a payment. So I'm assuming there's two sides to it. Since it's a brand new credit card entered, first part is to save it in the system or save a token of it on our backend or a third-party backend that we use. And then every time the user wants to make a payment, which is this time as well, the user not only enters the credit card, the user also makes a payment immediately. Then we use the token, right? So it's sort of a two-way there. And then we'll get a response, right? Response, credit card token. Yeah. And again, right, like here's the disclosure that I would make. I have not worked on fintech apps. I actually don't know if this is precisely correct or if there are any gotchas to think through, right, with that. But high level, I believe this is how it works conceptually. So we get the token and then the same like native piece that gets it back then could make a request to perhaps even the same thing, the same API. And this is going to be number 1. This is number 2, right? The sequence of events. And this is going to be number 3. Make payment request with credit card token, right?
This token may have some expiries and like,
yeah,
because we can't keep that for a long period. Yeah.
But again, those are like even more intricate details of it. I'm not sure if it's that important in this particular interview and question, right? Because they probably want to see the rest, right? We're just scratching 1/3 of it, right now.
Sure.
But yeah, and then I guess this is the part I'm not clear. What do they want to show later? My initial assumption was this is probably a native UI piece confirming your purchase or whatever that is, or membership start. They are talking about some sort of a redirect.
So this may be for those Paytm and other apps.
Oh, that's for others.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So let's assume then that this is what happens. Payment, confirmation, native UI, native view. Let's just assume that's where it goes at the end. And I think we kind of ultimately can safely assume they all should go there, right? At the end of the day. Yeah, something like that. So eventually as the last step, right? And eventually each one of them will get there. There's just more intermediate steps, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Here, just like this in between. This is one side, right? And then let's take that one, perhaps, as the next one. The web view. So net banking, what does happen there conceptually? The web. So the user selects this option from whatever the previous screen was, right? So I guess from here. And then we show a web view for a particular URL, I would assume.
Yeah.
And then it renders this. And this could be as complex or as simple as they want, right? It's a web view. We're not controlling on the mobile side what the hell's going on there.
So these are the bank's name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it could be either our payment API doing it, like returning the contents, or it could be a third party. We don't know.
Gateway, a payment gateway also provides this.
I think ultimately though, it probably will give us yet another like a token style thing about, in this case, not a credit card, but like a bank account information, potentially. Or ideally, I hope it does a token instead of raw like routing number and account number, right? But that might happen.
Obviously, I guess token would be more appropriate.
Yeah. And then I suppose similar thing happens. So I guess I could, how do I organize it? Let me try this so it's more clear. It's the same thing. So there's this kind of same API, right? I just don't want to put arrows in this guy because it's going to get too crowded. It's the same, well, different endpoint, I suppose, most likely, right? That not the web view itself, really. I guess from the diagram, it's not clear enough, but whatever the native wrapper of this web view, it will eventually get the token for the bank account from it. And then we need to send that as a same step number one, right? Send bank account token. And the rest of the process is actually honestly similar. Then we get a response back, and then we make a payment purchase. Same process, just not with the credit card token, but with the bank token. So let's sketch it out though. So a similar process, you already see a repetition and unification of this. And ultimately, I think same thing, we will get to the confirmation view, right? You know, that's the end of everything. And then these guys. So in this scenario, I'm assuming that we we'll build our own UI, right? What the SDK provides is just the endpoints and encryption or whatever. So then this is a little more complicated. It's also sort of part of this side of services and APIs, if you will. And I guess I can actually extend it. But this is more of a Paytm API server rather than ours, right? Somewhere within this UI, this is where, or UI piece, this is where we use this native SDK module. And yeah, and now let's talk about the sequence of things. The first part that we want to display is this list of banks. So what do we need for it? We need a GET request, probably, that the SDK will make to get us back an array of those banks. Let's say we can go deep into the pagination complication of it. I don't think it's necessary for this exercise. So yeah, let's assume it's just one list. Okay, so the first request would be get the banks list for this current user. Then there will be a response back. I mean, I know it's pretty simple and maybe redundant, but we need to spell it out, right, for the high level architecture. Then, okay, so we got the list, then we render it, right? Then the user selects one of the banks. I suppose, yeah.
This is for the net banking. Actually, Paytm is an app. Let's take an example like Paytm is a gateway. In the case of net banking, means if we select net banking, so there we get the list of banks, which we show on the web view. And Paytm, it's just like a payment app where I just scan the barcode or something like that, and then I get the information of the person where I'm sending the money, and then I can just directly send money to their account, or I can write the UPI ID to which I'm sending money, or with just the phone number. If you are in my contact list and you also have Paytm, so I just write your number over there, and then I directly send payment to your number.
Okay, so let me ask you then, from the product perspective, what's the user flow here? So let's say I have this list, I tapped on Paytm. What happens after that?
If we tap on Paytm, there may be options. Either we open the native SDK.
What does it mean, open the native SDK?
Native SDK means like my product team had contacted Paytm to get their SDKs to integrate in my own app.
What does the user see though?
Users may see they can just go and add their details over there with the UPI ID, and then they can pay.
Do
Or-
they get
or-
redirected to another app, or do they
Yes.
stay in your app?
So it depends. It depends. If we use the redirection URL or something like that, then in that case, that just redirect to the Paytm app. So with the token that this app wants to do payment through Paytm. Okay. Then it goes to the Paytm app, and then they can pay. And from there they get the success token and came back to our app.
Got it. I see. Okay. So let's talk that through then instead. So then we're going this route, more of it, right? Deep linking and all.
Yeah, because that bank list and all this we will get when we tap on net banking. So we will get all the list of the bank, which bank we are talking to.
Right, but it's going to be not within our app. It's going to be within the third party.
So that will be open in the web view where it will be given by the gateway. The gateway app means, imagine if I'm using the gateway of ABC payment gateway.
Okay.
So there, yeah.
Let's see that. Then the third party.
Yeah, like just we can use this, the third party
Paytm
pay app, like
app.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so then in this case, it's not going to be part of this services layer because we're not really talking to the API, at least not our app, right? Or even the system yet. So instead, I guess it's sort of like here, if you will. Instead, we are redirecting, I suppose.
Yeah.
With probably we have, so for this to work, right, we probably would have registered with them as one of the payment partners.
Yes, the same. Means you have some contract with that app that they are going to use your platform to do the payments.
Yeah. So, which I'm assuming they gave us some sort of a token.
Yeah.
So in this case,
so for that, to get this token, we use this native Paytm SDK, so that we call the API of Paytm SDK and we get the token to redirect to the app.
I see.
So that means Paytm also knows that you are coming from which app.
I see what you mean. Okay, that makes more sense. So then okay, so there is a the Paytm API after all.
Yeah.
But we use it a little differently. Okay, so then the step number one, we get the token. You're right. Oops. Get Paytm partner token
URL, something like that.
Token slash your, yeah, right, because they could give us a full URL. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So let's say it's this. Then they reply back. Hold on. Didn't I do this? No. They reply back.
Redirection URL.
Response. Yeah. Redirect URL slash token.
Yeah.
And then only then, as a third step, zoom in. Here we say we redirect
to that.
And that's, yeah. Okay.
So this native UI Paytm SDK, it's not needed. We just call the Paytm SDK API token or means activation URL.
So then at this point, right, in the user journey, the users was here, but clicking on it, jump to another app. And in that another app, they see something like this, potentially, right? Whatever they have there, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then they do all the actions needed to confirm the payment. And then they redirect back to us.
Yeah. So with the status of the payment success or failure.
Yes. Which let's say we do it like this. So that would be step number 4. Redirect back to our app with payment status token, whatever that is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. And then at this point, overall, we're assuming the happy path, right?
Yeah.
At this point, whoops, I think our app is done and we can redirect them to this confirmation screen, really.
Confirmation or failure.
Or failure, yeah. I mean, again, for the sake of exercise, probably should just assume, I mean, it's the same set of screens, doesn't matter. Yeah, so I think this, without all the edge cases, obviously, and failures and all of that, this is high level, like, it's not really the flow of the, sort of a flow of the app, if you will, right? And based on this, we now can actually build out the architecture with the view controllers and the view models or presenters or interactors or whatever you pick and choose for this. Because we figured out the domain model, essentially. Now, on to this, right? Like, what architecture best suits this? It depends, unfortunately. I hate the answer depends personally, but I will at least try to give you, depends on what caveat or clarification. So it depends on your team size. At least, well, to my knowledge, any client-side application architecture, not the backend, but the client side, like 95% of the reason to pick one or the other will depend on how many people work on the code base, not any performance questions, unless it's games, right? We're not building a game. So that's probably something you ask your interviewer, or you might even know ahead of time, right? What company you're talking to. Is it a large organization with 50 engineers on iOS, or is it a tiny company with just 2? Yeah. You might already know, but if you don't, ask them, and maybe even ask what challenges they had architecturally and with refactoring. But that's what it boils down to. You, roughly speaking, like a quick rundown of this potential options. You, roughly speaking, you have maybe 5 options these days. You can go with good old MVC, what Apple pushes on you. That might be fine for tiny apps, blows up pretty quickly, even with 2 people, to be honest. Yeah. Mdmvm is a pretty solid choice, even actually for slightly bigger teams of like perhaps 5 to 10 people. It might still fly and be all right. It has its own lacking layers that might become a problem, but overall, at least there is a business logic extracted in a typical Mdmvm implementation. There's like 4 ways of implementing Mdmvm, depends on which one you choose. There is also MVP, which they didn't list here, Model View Presenter. Yeah. That's similar in a sense to Mdmvm. It's great and will take you very far and way better than the MVC or no architecture, of course. But it lacks layers. At some point, your presenter just becomes too fat, or in this case, your view model becomes too fat. It will not be enough. Viper is one of the best because it's the most thought through and the biggest architecture. Large teams definitely go with something like that. Viper or Ribs, that's another variation of it. The downside, a lot of boilerplate, right? Or hypothetically, you could go with one of those web or client-side architectures like Redux, something like that stuff. It's probably, I'm gonna give my own opinion, this sort of my preference, not a good idea for mobile native apps. It's just, there are too many singletons in that architecture and it blows up as well, although people religiously think it's great. But I've seen it done on iOS, but maybe one time. But the main question though, like these guys are proven to work, right? Just they have their own pros and cons. And that's what you need to get from them, like from your interviewer. What are you optimizing for and the problem you're solving, and your today in your iOS engineering organization? Is that scale for lots of devs, or you don't really care or have time for it? Probably the middle ground to pick, and 85% of the people will be happy with your choice, is MVVM or MVP. Because people have reservations about Viper and similar, calling them bulky and too big, or people just hate on this thing. That would be me. I think this should not be chosen for anything, and it's too simplistic, right? If you're a junior engineer, it's fine. For a junior thing, go for it. But if you're experienced, no.
Obviously, means no. Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, Apple are very inherent to MVC.
They are.
Give, for example, in MVC and
yeah, I think
they give.
Yeah, they went overboard with it. They have different goals. The reason they push it, because the main goal of the corporation is to have the most apps built on their platform, and the way to do that is to have the most amount of number of developers work and build stuff for them, which means they need to make it the simplest, stupidest, dumbest possible, which is this, or Swift UI. That's why they push that and Swift UI now, right? It doesn't mean those are good solutions. They're easy solutions, which means an army of juniors could do it quickly.
Yeah. Recently, means they have in this iOS 16 the growable text field. Earlier, we have to override the class and then we have to make those things.
That's nice. Yeah. But then it's still Swift UI, and it still locks you in an architecture, which is whatever. That's a different topic for a different conversation.
Sure.
But for this, I think we can safely pick this thing or MVP. My personal preference, if I'm not going with Viper, then go with MVP. But the main thing is that we have this ready, which means we can model things out. And now it's pretty easy. You kind of have you're building a map of this, but with specific concrete classes and objects. So let's start with this, right? So this is the first screen for payment options selection. So for this, that means we need some sort of a view controller. So already. So let's start there. Oops. So payment options, view controller. So that's solid start. To get this list of the options, they can either be hard-coded, if we're just hard-coding it, or it could be configurable from the backend based on the region that you're in. Potentially, some regions have Paytm, some don't. So to increase complexity and show that we know what we're talking about, we probably can say to the interviewer, let's assume that, which means we would need a view model for this. So payment options view model. This is the time where as you build out those objects, you should be explaining what do they do? What are they responsible for? What do we need them? So in this case, the view controller is the view layer. It's responsible for rendering all of this, but that's it, right? It has no business logic. The view model in the MVVM variation we're choosing is the center of the business logic. It knows nothing about the UI. It is injected in the UI as a constructor initializer injection, and the UI will ask, hey, view model, fetch list of payment options. It will go do the networking. How would it do the networking? So let's spell this out. There is probably, of course, you can do the networking request and construct the URL within this view model itself. That's still better than in view controller, but we probably want to abstract it out and say there is a service object that does that. And here's the relationship. View controller injects this injects this, right? And here the same thing. If at this point of the interview you still have time and they're like asking you more detailed of, okay, so you load this screen, what happens, right? Because I, for example, had it a few times on the e-commerce applications interview, like for system design of a product screen. they like really wanted to know, okay, the screen loads, what happens then? And you can say, oh, okay, then it notifies the view model, and the view model then goes and asks the service, then the service responds back, sort of to, in a way, what we did here. Since we did it there, we don't need to repeat. Yeah, then it will get back the list, and this guy gets the list, perhaps massages it and maps it to internal model objects or whatnot. And then this guy renders it. We're for now done, right? Then the selection happens. The user selects one of those. Where do we go? I think there was a question about it originally, right? How do we?
Next page will be rendered considering each mode have different detail views.
Right. Well, and they do. And we kind of talked through this flow, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose we can have 4 arrows as well to 4 different selections that the user can make. And actually, let's literally do exactly that. But we will rename them as specific view controllers that we're routing to. So let's see. Let's see how we should arrange it. So if the first selection, let's say the user selects credit card or debit card, we probably want to route to the same screen. And that would be credit card view controller.
One thing I like to ask that, see, so routing. So here we are doing the routing thing on the tabs, where we should write those functions in the view model, or we should directly go from the view controller, or we should write a router. We make a class, a router class, and then we through the protocols we also inject that class, which router class, in while injecting the creating this controller.
Good question.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's finish out at least like a couple of those routes here, and then we'll address that. But remind me, please, if I forget.
Sure.
So here we're routing from this screen, right, the payments options screen, to the credit card. And that would be in 2 cases. When tap on credit card option or debit card. Debit card option goes to the same thing. This thing, analogous, it has its own view model for the business logic. And here we connect to that. This guy, though, let's look at what we had in this flow. So we're sort of spelling out the details of this native view piece right now, right? For the credit card. It goes to this payments API, which might be exactly the same as payments option API, might be not. It depends on how your stuff on the backend is organized. We could say that, yes, it's the same thing that's reused, or we could say there is another service object that, for the payments itself, right? To do this request for the credit card, or yeah. Doesn't matter. You can literally actually say that on the interview, like one or the other. They probably will know that you know now and move on. And then for the banking view, right? Let's say with the web view. Honestly, it's pretty similar. It's another tab. And this would be tab on net banking. And then the net banking. So in this case, it's a web view render. So there's still the view controller, still net banking view controller. Still probably has a view model the same way. Maybe, maybe it's redundant in this case, but if we're sticking to the MVVM architecture, then you should have it, right? Don't be lazy and still create it, even if it's boilerplate, because got to stick to the architecture. It's going to be easier to work with later. But it's, let's see. I suppose actually, so in this case, the web view sends bank account token. Oh, okay, right. So we decided that within the web view over here, eventually our app gets the bank token from the web view.
Yeah.
Right. And then we are making payments API request with the bank token. That's right. So then we need a service. So definitely we need a view model to orchestrate all of that. And in this case, we definitely want to rely on the same payment service because it's similar, right? For the credit card, it's the same thing. So we're reusing the object here already. Yeah, okay, we covered this. And then the Paytm. Okay, so this one's a little more complex because of the redirects. And let me think how to arrange it in the diagram. Yeah. Because when you do linking, right, deep linking, is that what we, man, why is it doing it? Hold on. Okay, that's better. So what would you just decide to do here again? We go to the API to get the token. That's right. Or the deep link URL. Then we get the deep link URL, and then we go to the third-party app. So this side would be exactly the same, but then going to the third-party app is a little complex because there's app delegate callbacks involved. So this one's complex. It depends on your architecture. I know how I would handle it with RIBS architecture, because RIBS architecture actually, it has facilities for deep linking. It thought through deep linking handling, and you can actually have a workflow and a chain of steps, action steps, chained with each other to do something like that when you get redirect back to your app. But normal MVVM app, it's up to you, right? It's completely not thought about to handle. Oh man, it would depend.
Yeah, so for that we will need to define that some deep linkings with in our app, so that means when it comes and goes, so we will be handling those through those methods.
Okay, let's see if we can sketch it out. So at least we know the start is pretty similar. We tap on one of the options, and it's a Paytm option. We go to the Paytm view controller. Well, do we? Hold on, let's think. Let me change that first.
I guess no. Actually,
I guess no. Yeah.
because when we tap on Paytm, so we should call the Paytm SDK APIs to get the token. Okay. And then from there we just redirect the app of our app to Paytm directly with the all necessary information of the user and the app and the amount and everything.
Well, yes, but with a caveat. So look, that's the thought. Think this through. So you click on this, right? Like as the user, imagine you're on the screen, you tap. Us on the logic code side of it, what we have to do is make a GET request to their API. So that's already an asynchronous thing. We have to show some sort of a spinner, right?
Obviously.
Probably showing a full screen with saying loading does make sense.
Yeah.
Which means it will probably be handled on top of this. So this screen is really the one handling. So we don't need a new view controller here, right? It's more of a, let me see. It's more, it goes to the view model really, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And then I kind of don't want to put it into diagram because it will be too crowded. But basically, as soon as this tap happens from the view controller, the view model will start the networking. and it will go to another service or SDK. Let's call it the SDK for the sake of argument. So it's going to be Paytm SDK that it will talk to, right?
Yeah, it will talk to this and give us the.
And then this thing gets us the token back.
Yeah, correct.
This, right?
Yeah.
We can actually say, yeah, we can put it there. This. And then again, something to say, spell out, right? But not put in the diagram that in the meantime, there's a spinner UI or some UI thing.
Or we can means when we load this page, we can get this Paytm, because we know we have a contract, so we can just get this token beforehand, before the user taps.
True. True.
So that is also have a caveat, because if imagine the user stays on that page for 5 minutes and did not tap on Paytm, so that session will be expired. So we should not do that.
Yeah, my hunch is that I don't, again, I'm not an expert in security for this kind of stuff, but my hunch is that probably more secure if we request it every time and it expires or whatever. Probably.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a good thing to call out, that it's sort of a, who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, so we covered that. Now we're at the step 3. We need to redirect. So this is the hard part with this architecture, right? MVVM that we chose. And again, like all of this, even if you think you realized, oh shit, I chose the wrong architecture or something for this, that's fine. Because you're at this interview, you see the problem first time ever. This is the thought process, the exploration that you're doing with the interviewer that will give you points. And it's very real world scenario, right? You quite often, you pick something and then as you code, you're like, oh crap, that's not the right thing. Yeah. So let's see. Let's try to visualize it. We got the request back. At this point of execution, we're inside of the view model. So the only thing we can really do is call back to this guy, right? To the view controller and say, here's the redirect URL potential. And then, of course, you can cheat, if you will, and use a singleton that Apple provides you. There is a, what is it, UI application singleton, right? And you call the open UI. You can, and probably most people will do it. And perhaps it's not even a bad option in this case. I would argue that you, at least definitely if you have Ribs or Viper architecture, you, let me just quickly show what it could have been, but we're not gonna go there too much probably. So you do have a parent, right? A parent, well, module really, or parent rib. But in this case, since we're doing MVVM, you probably have a parent view controller, right? So this thing is a parent of this, and then this has its own parent and so on, right? It's a chain. Yeah. Even though it's a boilerplate code, what I'm about to suggest, I still suggest it to be implemented like that. Callback, delegate callback, good old delegation. You call back from the payments when that finally happens, that when you get the redirect URL to the parent. Parent, if it has one, goes to the parent, and so on. Eventually, you will reach the app delegate. And honestly, this is the place to URL to something, because then when the redirect happens back, you handle it there as well. It's the single responsibility. I mean, app delegate has a ton of responsibilities, but at least that one's preserved, and we cannot decouple it because we're forced into using UIKit framework, right? So arguably that's why, you know, to at least keep this contained in one place, I would say do it here, right? And then this is a, what was the name of this? Paytm app. And then it redirects there, right? So It's a little convoluted, right? But
So for this whole chain, we have to pass the callbacks to the next controllers.
yes, again, if you're in the MVM thing, you don't have good facilities or protocols or default base abstract implementations for that. If you have another architecture like Ribs specifically gives you a framework to use for your Ribs and your interactors and everything, then you have at least some setup already. So this is easier.
Okay.
But since you don't, you know, but yeah, but this is what happens. So we covered the step 3 here now, right? We got to the app. Now the user sits in the app and does whatever the user needs to do there. Eventually, and this is another tricky part, eventually redirection back happens, right? The user is successfully done whatever he needed to do there. We will receive it in the app delegate. So again, arguably, and it depends on your interviewer. Some would think this is so dumb, and Alex, we're not gonna hire you because you suggest to do this. This is why I'm so keen on explaining really why, right? Because yeah, but because what I'm suggesting is the chain back, right? The app delegate then looks, oh, do I have that, whatever that other thing that was pushed? Let me, the response, since this is not the place where to handle it, let me delegate, pass it down the chain of the tree of the app. And if this thing doesn't know how to handle it, then let me pass it down, let me pass it down. Eventually it will be passed down to the back to the payments where we started, to this. We finally can remove the spinner, I suppose. Well, actually, no. We should have removed the spinner after the networking was done. Take it back.
Yeah.
But we finally get because technically within our app, the user still sees that screen, right? We just redirected to another one. And now we finally got the answer. And we can say, oh, confirmation done. And of course, I'm not going to draw it, but the confirmation screen is pretty simple. It's just a view control. Now, the asterisks and other options for this. As I said before, the cheating with singletons is probably the way to go that most people will choose. You cheat here at this payments options view controller level, and you do the open URL on the application UI delegate instance. That's one. So at least you save the round trip down. You cannot, well, but then you're still stuck with getting redirection back here, right?
Yeah.
After
so
they're done.
Yeah, for that we have to define some directly move to that controller deep links.
Right. So now what do you do here? You can also cheat with key value observation, and you can broadcast an event. That's an option, in my opinion, cheating. That's why I keep calling it that. Plus, it's not stable, meaning it's not compiler safe, right? And if you make a type, well, maybe these days they made a compiler safe actually, but still, it's like broadcasting into ether and no one kind of knows about it. What you could do instead, which is similar, but at least somewhat better because there's a compiler helpers for it, and you can actually unit test it. You can, when the app's launched, you can create a manager or a service of, I don't know, deep link broadcaster service. I don't know, something like that. The name could be better. I'm just making it up. And then as you push this view controllers, right? This one and this one and this one, and eventually get to this guy and the view model, this is where you inject it. Just like you injected this service and this SDK, you inject that broadcaster and subscribe to redirect broadcast. And that way, the app delegate will put it in the broadcaster, and right? So you would use the observable design pattern in this case.
Yeah, observable.
It doesn't matter if it's implemented custom with just like an array of observers and they implement a protocol, or it could be through RX, Swift, or Combine, or any one of those means. It doesn't matter. The end result is the same, but it still would be better than key value observation because it's less error prone and can be unit tested easily, I guess. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think this is it if we're choosing MVVM. Now, downsides, and one of the things to address with MVVM, and Saurabh, what you asked before, the routing, right? How do we do that with MVVM? And is the view controllers do it, or there is a router object or coordinator object, they sometimes call it. It's up to you, I suppose, and depends on your size. Again, right, of the team size, and do you have the time to properly put things in place and extract abstractions? Technically, if you chose MVVM or MVP, no, there's nothing specific that the design pattern or architecture provides for you to do it. And you're technically supposed to route from one view controller to another. So they will know either this view controller knows how to assemble this view controller, right? And knows that you can route from here to there, and so on, right? And this view controller knows how to go to confirmation screen the same way. Or yes, or you extract an abstraction, let's say router, that these things have, and potentially, actually, now I need to think about who will own the router. I don't really know. Maybe the view model will own the router, but the router definitely has to have a reference to this to actually push something.
Yeah.
But it could be.
Or if view model owns the router, then through view model methods, we need to tell view model that we have to route from self or from self. We call the view model from self with this data, or if the data you want from the view model, then get it from there.
Yeah, the one caveat though, the view model, you should strive to keep it just business logic, right? So it's making it route is a little yucky.
Otherwise, it will be a big fat thing.
Yeah, which it will already be a big fat thing, but at least it will be a big fat thing of business logic normally.
Yeah, for single responsibility, means single thing, business logic.
Yeah. So that is why I personally choose Ribs or Viper, even for small projects, even when I'm by myself, because this abstraction is there. The router is explicitly thought through and done for you, if you will. So you don't have to make those decisions. Oh, where do I put it and what does call it and whatnot. In this case, again, since we assume the team is smaller or whatnot, MVVM does not really help. But yeah, I think that's kind of it. That's how I would do this system design. It took us a little, maybe like 2 hours. So it's longer than a normal interview. So you will cut a lot of corners. And I think your interviewer might be actually already happy with this.
Yeah.
And as soon as you show them like this first portion, the interviewer probably will know, oh, you know that too. So let's move on.
Yeah.
But, since it's system design, high level, this is the most important. But they did ask you about specific architectures.
Yeah.
So yeah. My advice though, don't jump with, oh, I'll have the options, payment options view control. You could, and you could tease it out that way. Basically start from kind of coding something first and then asking all the questions. That's doable. Probably you'll have to revise so many things so many times.
Yeah, means we have to go actually reiterate things. We have to go back and think because this is a clear picture here. We just know how to do what we are going to do, and we just have to code. So that makes life much easier.
Yeah, and this was our coding, like this side of it. Yeah. So yeah, I like those. I like the system design stuff. They're like my favorite part of the interview, to be honest.
Yeah. Some means recently, sometimes you get bingo, means at exactly what they are asking, and sometimes it didn't click.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So a few more things to call out that to be aware of. Sometimes the interviewer might actually, as you're talking through this high level, side, they might be like, oh, well, what is the API? Right? How do you pass to like over here on the right hand side, the backend endpoint? Again, depending on the level of seniority, there is more expectation as more senior you get that you at least somewhat aware of it. Like, oh, is it RESTful or is it GraphQL or is it whatever? And don't worry about it too much if you don't know, but perhaps you should be able to write down on the whiteboard for them, oh, this one's going to be a post request with such and such JSON in the payload, perhaps. But honestly, I don't think it's that important. And one more caveat to call out about architectures again. Some people just might not like your choice just because of a principle or personal preferences and biases. I was on an interview with a smaller team, smaller company, 5 people, I believe. They just hated my ribs choice. And they even hated like the whole services extraction, which I think any architecture will and should have.
Yeah.
Just it's what it is. You know, if with other technical questions, you somewhat have the right answer, like, you know, if they ask you about Swift and what access levels they have, like public, private, open, yada, yada, right? There's a right and there's literal right answer. So it's a little easier, but this is more fuzzy.
Yeah.
Because you can solve it so many different ways.
Yeah. So that's straightforward things. And these are, means it's like mathematics, means you can solve them in n number of ways.
Yeah, it's an more abstract problem, but this is why you get paid the big buck to solve this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope it helps, Sourabh.
Yeah, sure.
So Alex, I think Saurav wanted to know about the architecture, but I think he also wanted to know about the case when we don't have a full-fledged contract of all the options. For example, he told us about different kind of payment options like credit card, debit card, Paytm app, etc. But I think he also meant that the server could send another option or a bunch of options which we don't know beforehand. How can we solve the situation, or did he actually meant that?
I think the way he phrased the question sort of sounded like, but it's not exactly what the problem is, because any application that you're building that is configurable from the backend, which today really almost literally 95% of the apps are backend driven in some form or fashion, right? You always get some sort of data from the backend either to render or to then determine the behavior of your UI, roughly speaking, where to go, where to route, right? But the degree to which that configuration and those pieces of data are influencing the behavior of the app is the question here, right? And at the end of the day, like you have to, it's impractical, whatever the word is, impractical to not know ahead of time the possible contracts that you might be, the contracts with the backend and the possible configurations that you might be having from the backend. You don't know which one you will actually receive at the runtime, but you know all of the options, right? So that's how we went through, like credit card, debit cards, UI piece, right, module, then the banking module, and then the other integrations. You can't, like, hypothetically, you could actually say, no, yeah, let's make it all so generic such that the backend drives what will be rendered completely. But then if you think about it, you are reinventing the wheel and you're rebuilding a browser. You will come up with some sort of a DSL language, domain-specific language, that will describe your UI and its behavior now at that point, because now the backend's controlling how it's not only rendered, but also behaves. And then you're sending that in whatever data format that is, maybe JSON, maybe some like blob of your new language that you invented. And then you build in an engine on the client side that will interpret that configuration, that the TSL piece to actually render the UI, right? Native or not. So AKA, you're reinventing the wheel of creating a browser. We already have that. We have HTML language, right? Markup language for things like that.
Mm-hmm. But nowadays we are also getting to hear some terms like server-driven UI. What do you think about that on
yeah,
on
that's
apps like iOS and Android?
partially sort of where that kind of, not where it goes, but the attempts there, I suppose, with like React Native specifically, or React. I guess React Native cannot really do that, but React can, where you can pre-render so-called like server-side rendering. Given the state of UI on the back end, you pre-render, like you run the React engine or whatever it's called, framework, on the server before it even hits the browser for it to figure out what HTML is gonna be displayed, and then you package that as the HTML page that the backend renders back to the browser as that GET request, right? I suppose that is kind of a way to go, but then it has all of these downsides of your client side. Like, it's still a client-side application that you're rendering, right, with its own predetermined logic. It cannot just meander and not know what it's going to be rendering, right? You still declare it somewhere. There's concrete things to show. So now just the burden of it, I guess, is on the backend. So again, you're now in the business of building engines, rendering engines, which might be, again, a way to go, but it's impractical most of the time. You want your client-side app to be more like fatter these days for richer features, if you will, and leaner backend. Yeah, so that's why we want to predetermine like all the cases that we can cover.
That's an interesting take from your side. Oh, okay.
But look, so think of Uber, for example. This is a very rich, fat application, client-side application, right? It has even fatter backend, but for, I guess, from our perspective, right? It's when they create, so when Uber writes their consumer rider application, for example, or driver application, all of the modules, all the possible combinations, all of the possible modules for the US, India, European countries, everything, all the payment options for those, right? All of it is built in and compiled and sits there and waits to be displayed based on some sort of data coming from the backend, such as location, right? Which location we're using, what feature flags are on, and so on, right? So this, your UI is abstracted and generic in a sense that it can display any one of those, but those options need to be predetermined, right? And you declare them probably somewhere at the top of your main function or application delegate, roughly speaking, right? It has a bunch of module factories. They will sit there and wait to be triggered at the runtime to create and produce particular a UI feature or a module or a payment option and so on. But you cannot avoid of not declaring them up front, right? Again, unless you have an engine which will interpret some other configuration, such as HTML or whatever else, and then that will do it. But then your engine needs to be so flexible, so dynamic, right? Yeah. Again, you're getting into the realm of browser building, and it's not practical for any consume or use any like application, right? Then you're building a library, engine library.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on sort of other stuff? Did I maybe I missed some stuff with the solution that I was proposing? Because as I think I said on the video, this was the first time me seeing it. It's how I probably would have solved it on the actual interview.
No, you were absolutely correct while solving those problems. I can say that because I'm also working on the similar stuff in my present organization. And these are the common solutions being implemented by the fintech companies. This is a common type of architecture, I believe, like uh, getting the secure token first and then
Yeah,
doing
so
all your stuff on the basis of that token. Yeah.
that part I actually don't really know. Like I kind of pull it out of my head, right? Like
Mhm.
I really don't know how it's actually done because I never worked with that specifically. I only worked with Stripe. Stripe is like this payment provider, right? And I only worked with it on the back end and like for web development. So the concept of tokens that I think of, which is probably not fully full, is based on that. On iOS, I haven't worked with it. I don't really know how that goes.
Mhm.
Another thing that I thought like maybe I will explore kind of what sparked my interest, other options, architectural options, because I mean, Ribs is the architecture of choice for me personally. Thus far, nothing better that I found. But I want to check out, like, I think briefly we briefly mentioned it on the recording, the Redux or like Redux style architecture, whatever the hell the React people are using, and now Swift UI people, I suppose. So I want to check that out
Mhm.
more deeply, if you will.
Let's get back to the same problem which Saurabh posed. I think when you were proposing that architectural solution, like based on the token exchange, I was thinking of the security concern as well. Like, how would you deal with the tokens? There will always be a risk of token thefts or man in the middle attacks. So if someone just poses that he is the real server
Right.
and you give him his credit card or debit card information, how would you deal with that? I mean, that man in the middle can just give you his fake token and he will trick you into believing that he's the one who is getting that information. So how would you solve that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look at you interviewing me now again.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't really know again because I never thought about it too much. Never had that problem uh, with what I was working on. But probably, I mean, there's off the top of my head two sides to it. Um, some sort of a handshake needs to happen, right? Of like private public keys so that you can encrypt, decrypt the request
Yeah, I
happening.
was also thinking about the same. Right,
Yeah,
right.
to
Yeah.
get the token and validate that the token is the right one or something. But also, my thinking is that this payment token or transaction token, if you will, maybe it's a one-time thing, right? Like it's only a token per this particular transaction for this particular credit card or something. So that even if, okay, there is this one bogus transaction that got spoofed somehow, maybe at least you can do subsequent with the same credit card or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I suppose, yeah, if there's a proxy of sorts between your client-side app and the backend, and you submit credit card data, it's literal like actual numbers, right? Then they would get it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know really. Need to think about that. Well, maybe like research on how that's done. I suppose that's half of the fintechs, like if you work in fintech, it's half of your job to know this crap, and the other half is to build the UI. Roughly speaking. I don't know. Payments are hard. Payments are interesting, and payments are hard. I want to think that these days we got to some sort of a standard and a best practice, right? It's been so many years of e-commerce, internet transactions. And so I would hope there's abstractions and security best practices to like encrypt and handshake and yada, yada, yada of your requests for that. I don't know though. I don't know. Like, I suppose like how, I don't know much about networks, but then my question would be, last time I think of it, last time I was reading anything about how networks work and TCP packets and shit like that was way back in college, right? But my question is, how would someone put a proxy between your app and your server? Because you're making a request to a particular domain, right? When you make a get or post or whatever that is, it still goes through HTTP, right? So there is a DSL DNS lookup thing that will point you to the proper and correct IP address for that, right? And then there's
I got your point. And
yeah,
I also
I'm just
used
like
to wonder
speculating, I guess.
I also used to wonder the same thing, but in the interviews, if you give this answer, they
I
will not
know
consider
that
it,
probably
right?
wouldn't fly. Yes, guys, don't take that as an advice for your interview answer. That's probably horrible.
They are
Although,
expecting a solution from us.
yeah, I
They don't.
suppose.
Yeah, because we
Although,
are not hackers, right? We
yeah,
are not hackers. We
honestly,
don't know how this attack works, or so.
yeah, if the interviewer like tries to drill that from me, like they dig deeper and drill and get that out of me, I'll probably say piss off, because I don't know. I don't really care, right? Unless I was applying for a job that's really about that, like a security company like Okta, right, that we use to verify identity and authorization, all that stuff, right? For them, security is the core of the business. I mean, arguably, I guess, again, fintech is also, it's a core feature, but I don't really know. I'm a client-side dev, yo. I just build mobile apps. If you tell me I need to sign the HTTP request with certain encryption or whatever key, I'll do that. But like, tell me what you want me to do, I guess, in this case.
Okay, then they will ask, if you say that, then they will ask, okay, we are interviewing you for a senior role and we are expecting you to know about these security things.
That's true.
Right? If you don't know this stuff, what's the difference between a junior developer and a senior developer?
Oh, the difference is I can architect this crap so well that it will actually scale, and the junior probably can't. But yeah, you have a good point. That is, I suppose that's one of those extra knowledges that you would expect from a senior dev. But again, it's arguably very domain specific thing that not everyone, you wouldn't expect everyone to know.
Yeah.
Look at me trying to make an excuse. Look at me trying to excuse myself from lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's kind of, to me, it's the same level of, oh, do you know how pixels get rendered in a UI view on the screen? I don't fucking know, nor do I care.
I know, right? I know, right? But if you are sitting in an interview, you can't give this straightforward answer. Although the other side also knows this, and it's also possible that the guy who's asking this question, he himself or she himself doesn't know about this.
Right. That's the worst part, right? And then they make a smart face and like, no, this is not how it is, because I can think of it like this. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. I don't know. These days I don't know if you and I talked about it before, but well, on a podcast, I mean, I know we talked off the recording, but I'm so upset with the interview process overall these days?
Now, actually, I'm also thinking, I'm not sure if my question was so dumb. There's supposed to be always a handshake when you hit an HTTPS request. Since this is a secure request, this public key cryptography, that's been happening already. I mean, by the network layer itself.
Yeah, right. There's already
And
that.
but still, if an interview asks you this, if this is the right answer or not, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. I don't know. So that would have fit into an interview, but then the other half of like, oh, let's actually figure out what view controllers and view models you'll have and what service objects. That I would not have had enough time. So that's sort of another consideration for anyone interviewing for something like this. Like, oh, you could take my approach, but you need to be faster with it or simplify, I suppose. I don't know. I normally, in my experience, I had like smaller problem. Like I had to build a bunch of e-commerce product screens for e-commerce apps. So that's still a big problem, but it's at least one screen. And normally your approach is like, oh, let's break it down in a bunch of modules that have their own like interactors or view models for their own business logic. And then you compose the screen with those, right? And maybe you have some scrolling considerations, right? That needs to be fast and analytics need to be precise, stuff like that. But figuring out the user flow wouldn't take as much time as it took me with this one. So yeah, I don't know. And then the other interview questions I had of like system design like this mostly were, oh, let's build a link shortener or some crap like that. That's not useful, or like backend specifically. Well, let's build a ticketing system or something for airline company. Like,
yeah,
right.
after reading and hearing such questions, I sometimes think, am I getting interviewed for a backend role?
Yeah,
or
that's such backend questions.
Yeah.
Like it's not related to our stuff. Yeah. These days, unless I really want to work with that company, like the job market's so great, I don't even do this stuff. I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not gonna do this. Bye.
And sometimes I think that the company should realize this, and they
Right.
should upgrade their interview questions. I mean, I sometimes think that they are just grabbing the system interview question directly from Google, like what are the
Right.
trending system interview questions, and they just pick them up, no matter for which role you are interviewing the person, right? Because these
Yeah.
questions are directly related to backend. Right?
Yeah.
We are not going to code backend. I'm a front end side developer. I'm an iOS developer. I will just work on iOS, right?
Yeah.
Why do I care to know about these questions? They should ask system design question related to the iOS architecture itself, or
yeah, the iOS concerns, right? And they're very unique, like mobile app concerns specifically. Like even front-end app, client-side app of the web is it's very similar, but slightly different though with mobile. Like mobile always has this whole offline mode situation to take care of. It has unreliable internet connection to take care of, like lots of stuff. The web apps normally don't, because they assume the internet connection is there. And then the backend obviously is completely different. Yeah, I don't know. I interviewed with Amazon twice, like way back when I was very green and naive and young, maybe my first or second year of coding. And I failed it miserably. And then second time a few years ago, I also failed it. I want to think less miserably, but I got that kind of question like, oh, Alex, how would you design a ticketing system? Like, what the fuck? Yeah, like you're hiring me for an engineering title, technical or software engineer title, But come on, like I'll be building mobile stuff. That's my core skill set. They argue that, oh, we see how you think and your thinking process and blah 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 blah, blah. Whatever, man. Just let's code together. Let's pair program. I will interview you as well, myself as an interviewee, through pair programming session, right? I'll see how you interact. You, my future boss or coworker, right? Maybe I don't want to work with you either. Who knows? Interview is a what is it? Two-way street. Goes both ways.
Well, that's so true. But the situation nowadays and recession already looming upon,
I
I
suppose.
don't think someone will dare to say that.
I mean, doesn't matter recession or not. Skilled, experienced developers always will be in demand. We always have too many juniors in our industry. There's like more than half at any given point in time of juniors, because every year we get way more people that join the workforce of coders. But that means every year we get a fuck ton of people with like first year of their coding, right? No, experienced devs are so hard to find. Yeah, and maybe, now if there is a recession, and some people say we're already in it for a couple of months, fine. Maybe it's a little, a little less competitive, but I think you still be able to find a job easily. And whatever, just have some money saved up or something so that you can last a few months without a job. Then you don't have to pick that first crappy job that comes along, right? Or put up with the stupid interviews and go to the next one and next one. One of them will be nicer to you, And I know it's like everyone has different life situation and stuff. Like I don't have kids right now, and I have my mom to support. Really, that's it, and myself. So like it's easy for me to save money and stuff like that, right? And I'm in the US. The economy here is great, despite of whatever recessions and stuff. So there's plenty of money. If you're like in a different part of the world that has different economics, right? Maybe you earn a little less, but I still believe in any part of the world. Is it like the US, Europe, Russia, India, or Antarctica? I don't care. Probably as a software dev, you make so much relative to the rest of the population, right? That you will probably be able to save some money. So come on, that's not an excuse, right? Just have a safety net, and then it will be less stressful for you.
Agreed.
But yeah, so yeah, like it was actually very entertaining for me to do. I like doing those kinds of interview questions, I guess, like system design. So if we have more people, I'm happy to do more of that. So any one of you listeners who maybe has an interview question like this, please hit us up. Maybe Sandeep will be able to join me next time to do it together, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. I will definitely join the next time we get a question from you guys.
Yeah, because I think honestly, then if we did it together, it wouldn't be exactly a simulation of an actual interview, right? But I bet we can come up with a way better solution than I did on my own. Because then it's like a pair whiteboarding, if you will.
And I think, as you said already, that interview is a two-way discussion, right? Just don't think that you are getting interviewed. Think like that you are having a technical discussion with your peers, right? Where you're trying to solve one problem, and in that way you will not feel pressurized to solve that problem. In pressure we generally don't give our 100%. We are always in such a situation that we have to give our best, and by getting into such a interview pressure, we generally don't give our 100% and make mistakes. So yeah, we should treat it like a discussion, uh, the interview process, right?
Yeah, you nailed it. I think one last closing thought on that specifically. I think I mentioned it during the discussion with Saurabh, but I'll kind of elaborate. There was so I had an interview with a small company, maybe 3, 4 iOS engineers on the team, and like it's a like similar situation where they gave me like, oh, let's build a feature, and it was more kind of like this, more specific, like mobile feature in the mobile app and a couple of screens to design, which was great. But during the interview, when I start to, so I did ribs instead of view model, right? And I start to show like, oh, here we'll have a rib like for this, and it will have an interactor, we'll have the business logic, and then the view layer will just render it, and then there will be a service object to make the request, and then the storage object to then persist it to disk when the request like comes back with data, and then the interactor coordinates that stuff like that, right? And so as I'm explaining that to the interviewer, the guy's like, oh yeah, Alex, this is over engineering. We don't do it like this over here. Blah, 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 blah. And fair, perhaps, right? And that was that feedback right there, right? That, okay, so probably if I join the company, there's going to be head butting heads with him and like the rest of the team probably about this. And potentially my solutions that I'll be proposing and most likely will be shut down and not received well. So here we go. That was the feedback back for me from that interview that, oh, probably shouldn't work there. Not because I want to have it my way always, but there's a difference between like shutting you down immediately or discussing like, oh, Alex, why would you do it like this? We've done it some different way. What are the pros and cons? So there's that, right? The conversation of let's figure out the best solution. Maybe I don't like yours already, but like, let's dig deeper why, versus just like, no, screw this. So. Yeah.
So how much senior was he? Like, was he in a manager, like engineering manager?
He was a lead dev of the team. So he was like lead iOS or lead mobile dev. So that would be the guy I would interact with every day based like with that stuff. Because these days, it was a recent, like a year or two ago interview. So these days, that's what I do, right? When I join companies, like, yeah, I mean, I'm working on features, but my bulk of like value that I bring and what I drive is the architecture, right? Like Sandeep, well, you remember we worked together, right? That's basically what I started almost day one. Like, oh, let's rip this stuff and put it inside out and at least shape it a little better, so then we can have Lego blocks.
Yeah, I also remembered our conversations when you used to suggest something and I was like, okay, what are the pros and cons of this? Why should not we do it this way? And then you try to explain it, like what are the pros and cons.
And it was
this
like,
is how we should work. Yeah,
exactly. It was pushback from you, but the constructive, right? Where it's like, no, Alex, not like, oh no, Alex, we haven't done it before, so we're not doing it like this, but more of a, well, but why? And things like that.
And I think in this way, by just not shutting down the approach coming from other side, in this way we both get to learn something new, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. By discussing the pros and cons, each of the guy involved in the discussion will get to know something new. The guy who proposed the solution and the guy who was not previously convinced with the solution, or both will present their pros and cons, and eventually the team will win, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys, before we wrap this up, quick shameless plug on my end. If you like this episode and like the system design interview that we went over with Saurabh, You might also like the video course that I have and continue to update, System Design Interview for iOS. You can find it on this website, iosinterviewguide.com/system-design-interview. And basically, I cover many more examples, such as Messenger application or e-commerce app, like Wayfair, things like that you might use to prep for your system design interview. Check it out.
Subscribe and hit that notification button so you never miss the next episode.